thank you all for joining in. And I'm your moderator for this evening. And we want to welcome, on behalf of Microsafe Consulting, all the guests today to this panel discussion. So before we move to the main discussion, I want to introduce our panelists to you. So we have Mr. Jonathan Van Guinness, who is with Development Gateway. And we have Asta Kapoor, co-founder and one of our ex-colleagues in MSc, and she is leading data governance and related work with Apti Institute. And we have Mr. Tarakeshwar, who is the CEO of Dwara e-Registry. It's a prominent Agtech service firm based out in India, and are doing remarkable work in the field of climate advisory and precision credit and insurance for the farm sector. So before we proceed with the main topic of this discussion today, which is very interesting around data governance and how practically it can be implemented, we'll hear from all the panelists. I'll just take a few minutes to help you understand where we are and why we are organizing this webinar. So MSc has launched a virtual platform called the Climate Resilient Agriculture Virtual Club. It's a platform where we are seeking stakeholdership or partnership from prominent institutions like financial services institutions, impact investors, donor agencies, development institution, implementation agencies, and of course the ag fintech players in India, South Asia, and also in East Africa. We also have a crack VC East Africa chapter. The objective of this is to bring together the various perspectives, which often we found that is not shared very well within the industry. So we are trying to bring these various perspectives, want to give a platform to all of us to hear out each other, and based on this shared perspective, develop something meaningful towards one common goal, that is transformation of the agriculture sector in the most climate vulnerable regions of the world, focused on smallholder agriculture, and based on the philosophy of dissemination of innovation and creating a world of digital and connected agriculture. So it's a lot of concepts going around focused on smallholder farmers who are climate vulnerable, and therefore, giving each of these various stakeholders a voice, an opinion to share with others, and to create a mutually workable solution towards this main objective. So with this, I want to open the floor for today's discussion, and we'll start with Jonathan, you presenting your perspective on this subject matter. So over to you, Jonathan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Partha. If it's okay with you, I'd like to share my screen to begin with, just so I can share my my slides, and you don't have to look at my face. Oh, that's the wrong one. Good evening, good morning, everyone. I'm saying good morning as it's still early day for me, calling in from Montreal, Canada. It's very much a pleasure for me to be here today, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to talk about our research and to be on this call with all of you. A little bit about myself. My name is Jonathan. I'm originally from the Netherlands. I have a background in international law and in economics. And with that background, I've worked as a consultant with and for national and local governments and large global NGOs, mostly in the innovation / data management and governance space. Over the last half a decade, the interest in data governance has grown a fair bit, as Asta can probably attest, especially in the development sector. And I've worked on many related projects. And we've seen in particular interest grown in experimenting and learning from approaches that can negate the negative impact of some of the current practices. So hence also the interest of USAID, the US Department for International Aid or International Development, to fund this study. The idea was to gain a better understanding of what's happening in the ag sector, as there's little to no research on the different governance approaches, and even less so on the practical implications. So with this study, we set out to have a look at what data governance approaches are relevant and what are the implications, building on the work done earlier by the likes of the API Institute. And I would really recommend looking at their site. There's a lot of very, very valuable articles there and information. I've scoured their websites many times for many years already, and they do a lot of really good work. So importantly, we wanted to start by acknowledging and creating more awareness around some of the issues of current paradigms and the political economy of agricultural data. So why do we need to look for new paradigms in the first place? I will, for now, not go into the potential benefits of Agtech and digitization. I'm sure most of you have extensive knowledge of this. While the use of data in Agtech holds a lot of potential to strengthen the sector, farmer capacity and data governance challenges raise the possibility that farmers will not benefit equally from their data. We live in an era where a small number of big ag companies increasingly hold unprecedented control over farm data, and companies that control the flow of data to and from farmers are more integrated than ever. Just an example, Mineral, a part of Google's parent company Alphabet, hopes to cover US farmland with solar-powered rovers that use advanced perceptual learning to document and gather data about enormous amounts of plants. This is just the latest of a series of companies making big promises about the benefits of farmers and the environment. They fail yet to acknowledge how automation impacts farmers and rural communities. 10 years ago already, in 2013, we saw Monsanto, and now Bayer, the world's largest seed company, pay $1 billion for a data company called Climate Corporation. At the time, people didn't understand why would a company pay so much money for a tiny startup. Well, it was because the Climate Corporation has had a large amount of weather and environmental data. So Monsanto tried to defend itself for what they saw coming, the big tech, Microsoft, Alibaba, Amazon, etc., thinking they need to become a data company themselves. The CTO of Monsanto even said that he could see themselves being more of an IT company than a seed company. And sure enough, that has happened. They and other big companies have transformed themselves into being able to deal and profit from large-scale data extraction and connected strategies of automation, carbon credit, and other things. As such, the industrial food chain is characterized by the attempt to standardize and push for hegemonic technological models. Now, these data/ag companies are saying that they will sell farmers also artificial intelligence generated prescriptions on how to farm. If you give us all the data from your farm, and that could be sensor data from a tractor or a smartphone, and environmental data, we will send this to our machine learning agents who have access to all the data from many other firms to generate these predictive models and share them through platforms such as Climate Field View. So if you do this exactly, you will get such and such outcome. You can then buy our prescription products, such as pesticides, and we'll guarantee you a certain outcome at market. This results in farmers being locked into long agreements. We must not forget the human element in smallholder farming. When you talk with farmers themselves, their families, communities, besides making a living, they are very much concerned about their sovereignty, control, and decision-making. They feel like they are put entirely under the control of large corporations, algorithmically controlled, so to say. And they feel that they don't have a choice. They don't follow if you don't follow or invest in a certain way, you get cast aside, basically. So of course, there's a lot of mistrust and suspicion among farming communities about whether their data, where the data is being held, what it is used for, and would actually be used against the farmer. Another example was where Monsanto collaborated with and shared data with Trimble. They were known as the Airbnb for land. And suddenly farmers were contacted by their landowners that pushed up their rent based on the data that showed them the value of their land. There's also more and more research showing that bias is being exacerbated. Just as we know there's racial bias coded in certain AI systems, that is even more obvious in farming. There are developers that do not understand the circumstances or realities of smallholders, developing in ways that exclude and override interests and the needs of farmers. Many of these systems are built for large farmers and landowners in the US or Europe, who are able to afford these technologies with their own agenda and bias, very different from farmers' reality in India, for example. This is nothing new, of course. If you look at the history of industrial food system, we see the same patterns all over again. So we often think of tech can only be developed in one way. And right now, this is often not in the interest of smallholders. Yet you could have different food systems that would probably look very different, where power is distributed in a different way and how technologies could be developed and implemented by smallholders. There are small movements trying to do this, to push against this, trying to develop tools led by and with farmers. And farmers see the technology being built around them, and many are actually eager to have a role in shaping it. So given Agtechs' breakneck forward momentum, implementing fair and equitable data governance models that prioritize farmer participation while protecting farmers against disadvantages and exploitation is crucial. For this reason, there's a pressing need to unpack data governance practices and challenges within the ag sector. So the objective of our study is to raise awareness around the data economy and its implication, showcase farmer-centric data governance models that counter or provide for an alternative of these hegemonic approaches, identify user-centric data governance models and mechanisms, particularly in low and middle income countries, and identify appropriate and relevant actionable principles and recommendations. A few quick notes on then what farmer-centric participatory data governance is. So those affected have the greatest understanding of the challenges and opportunities, and they must be actively involved in order to develop solutions. Who controls data governance has implications for how people are represented and included in the process and decisions. This affects what gets attention, by whom, and how data is collected, analyzed, interpreted, and presented. The enabling environment, purpose, and bias of those in charge affect how data governance is designed. This can reinforce or rebalance relations in society. When farmers and their communities actively participate in decisions about data governance, they gain greater access to benefits of data. Farmer-centric participatory governance, data governance, improves the understanding of ethical and practical concerns regarding data collection, sharing, and use. It can inform and affect data quality and strengthen the governance of technology itself through information from diverse perspectives and experiences. Farmer-centric approaches can adapt and manage more easily to address risk and associated with complex and sensitive data. It's important to note that while farmer centricity and participation may take different forms or have different outcomes, they are usually not mutually exclusive and can complement each other. There's no single right way to do this. Effective data governance is not a one-size-fits-all solution or model. The complexity of local contexts and current data governance paradigms can be resolved by an off-the-shelf approach. There are different types of approaches, methods, and means that afford very different levels of influence and power. And finally, data governance is the output of collective knowledge and interrelational network. As more digital tech permeates and informs farm activities, enabling analysis and services, the need for farmer-centric models and deliberation increases. This must include genuine knowledge sharing, transparency, and recognition of the many networks of labor that are required to develop these systems. I'll just go to the slide. So you can find all of this in our report. We developed 6 additional documents laying out in short the 6 most accounted for data governance models and approaches. Personally, I like to refer people to the case studies as to demonstrate the meaning and application of these models. Since I'm already talking a lot, I'll just focus on 2 of them, both of which actually take place in India. The first one was built with Digital Green, who launched FarmStack in 2021. as a data platform dedicated to fostering coordination between and data sharing between ag systems in India and Ethiopia, between farmers and agribusinesses, using a fiduciary model that ensures the data and benefits flow back to the farmers. As fragmentation is a challenge in collecting data, there are many companies, governments, NGOs, all requesting data from farmers, but working independently. With so many actors working in silos, this ecosystem of centralized sources results in farmers answering similar questions many times. So the resulting fatigue erodes trust in these systems, especially when products and services do not live up to their expected or stated benefits. There's a need for a single market of Agtech and services to allow SMEs with new applications to reach a large number of farmers and create a space where farmers are supported to select the most suitable solutions. In India, where workers in the ag sector have the lowest levels of digital literacy at 13% and 24% for those who earn a regular salary. These are very low numbers in comparison to non-agri sectors. This lack of literacy results in an information asymmetry, which limits the negotiation positions of farmers, and in turn exacerbates the already existing power imbalances between big business and communities. So Farm-Stacks creates data ecosystems that build agency for the farmers as the drivers of this network, built on open protocols that facilitate secure and trusted data exchange. It merges from different actors and collection methods into cohesive, coherent data, more easily disseminated to farmers, and allows farmers to dictate distribution and access. They work with all smallholders to develop a governance model, collaboratively designing and implementing a data strategy with equal input from all. The end result allows the platform operator to function as a data steward, where the platform facilitates agreed upon terms and conditions. The second case study I will quickly mention is it's an entirely different one, where the Cadastre Foundation has been working with Vattenfall to secure a right of forest-dwelling families. With Cadastre's training and SW tools, Vattenfall is mapping and collecting forest and household-related data for indigenous communities living in forest of the Raigad district in Maharashtra. Currently, many of these communities lack any form of formal records or proof of their communal and individual forest rights. This includes terms of use on data governance that place the data ownership within each community. So Vattenfall uses outreach programs to initiate dialogue among tribal communities to raise awareness and provide an avenue for everyone to participate in decision making. These communities and the women who have been empowered through the program are equipped with the needed knowledge to use the user-friendly platform to map land parcels. Finally, you can see here our main recommendations, but I'll leave it for this now, because I think I've been talking a lot and I've been sharing a lot of content for now, and happy to answer any questions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's really exciting to hear what is happening in the Agtech or in the agri sector per se, with regards to the newly formed idea around hearing the voices of smallholder farmers and bringing them into the data governance ecosystem. We'll now request Astha to provide her inputs based on her experience and understanding on the policy landscape of data governance in India in general, that our Agtech partners and players in the industry should be cognizant about, and sort of set that trend and plan for some future policies that might come that might affect them. So Astha, over to you to help us understand what's happening in the sector.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to congratulate Jonathan on his presentation. Of course, it's something that I agree with vehemently as well. So yeah, it was just really excellent to see that. Before I get into the policy landscape, which there stands to say on, I also wanted to quickly talk about a model that Jonathan didn't get into, which is the data cooperative, which is the one, it's my favorite, where we've been working also with a women's cooperative, an agricultural cooperative in Gujarat. And what we are trying to understand in the same vein as Jonathan said is, bottom-up data governance, and how do you give people access and agency to their own data. So we're trying to understand how women that through the cooperative structure that already pool their assets, which is capital and labor, and deploy that in different directions. How can they pool data as well? And some of the interesting use cases that we are seeing are around access to credit, around even things such as data minimization, because as anybody who has been in an interaction with a financial services provider will say know that they ask for significant amounts of data. So through the cooperative structure, we're also hopeful that women will be able to push for their own data rights in the form of minimization, for instance, and also negotiate for better products, both from the government as well as the private sector. However, of course, a lot of this in the context of India, at least, remains something that we have to think much more about from the policy lens. So as we know, India has been struggling, or not struggling, but it's been a slow process for us to develop and pass the data protection bill. So this is going to provide individuals with protections and rights over their data. The second part of it is that was also contemplated over the last few years was the non-personal data, which basically meant that data that is not about identifiable to humans. So it's interesting that the questions around agriculture do fall into that. So soil health, irrigation patterns, quality of seeds, etc., would all fall into this broad bucket of non-personal data. And then there are other sort of regulations around open data, government and public data, which types of data sets should be open, which should be public, whether there's a requirement from the private sector to make certain kinds of data available in the open and public domain. So there are multiple laws and regulations that are likely to come and will impact how we share agricultural data. The other thing that is also happening is that, as we know, India is building a whole system of digital public infrastructure. And so in the context of agriculture, there's going to be an India, it's called the IDEA framework, which is the India digital ecosystem of agriculture, which is supposed to build a whole, as it says, ecosystem around delivery of services in a farmer-centric way. And it will be like, the other stacks that we've been thinking about, which is, the health stack, and all of which is based on India's India stack. But the concept paper was floated in 2021. It is still, I think, under consideration, though I think that the Ministry of Agriculture has started to work on aspects of that. And that also talks about a federated farmer database that would serve as the core, like, I guess, fuel for the agri stack. There are, of course, concerns around things like this, but I wanted to just zone into why agricultural data is fairly peculiar. One is, of course, and from the policy lens, right? So one is, of course, the personal data rights of the farmers themselves. So any kind of identifiable information. The second thing, which is fairly complex, is even when we think about non-personal data. So like I said, irrigation, soil health, etc. Every farmer will have questions around their own intellectual property when it comes to the way they choose to till their land. And the complexity around this is that providing the adequate protections to certain kinds of farm practices, which may be in the realm of non-personal data, is not something that we are contemplating. So those questions around safeguarding intellectual property rights as well as confidentiality of farmer practices is again something that is missing in the context of agricultural data. The other part of the problem is perhaps much easier to understand, which is that digitization in the agricultural sector is fairly limited. So as we think about building a broader digital ecosystem in the context of India's agriculture, the fact that a significant amount of India's farmers are fairly offline is one part of it. And the ones that are online are also not able to, either meaningfully use technologies or, when they do use technologies, they are looking at not being able to safeguard their interests. So even in agricultural tech companies can be fairly data extractive. The last point I'll make is on this, that farming in India is a community experience. We do that in groups. So even when people, whether it's in the form of loans or even when they take a bag of fertilizer or when they procure seeds, they do that as a collective. So it'll be either through farmer cooperatives or self-help groups, or even sometimes some form of shared croppers, etc., will come together, pool in their resources. But when it comes to questions around data and protections around data, those happen at an atomized level. So what it does is that it breaks down the collective experience of agriculture into an individualized experience with regard to data. And that's fairly counterintuitive, and it's impossible to safeguard data rights around that. So to the point that Jonathan was making about thinking about instruments that do bring that collective experience with regard to data governance is fairly important and not adequately reflected in the policy conversation. I also think that a huge part of the data landscape with regard to agriculture will lie with the government. We did a piece of work a couple of years ago on the use of non-personal data in the agricultural space. And what we realized is that obviously there needs to be certain amount of reciprocity between the government and Agtechs. But when it comes to the government sharing data, things like obviously availability, quality, and questions of interoperability and standardization of data are a huge concern. So even when the government is willing to share data, which is always suspicious, they are not sharing it in a way that is usable to the agricultural technology companies, and also expecting reciprocity from agtech companies on data and building that data ecosystem then becomes problematic. So for me, the policy conversation is one about how do we think about collective data rights of farmers. Two is how do we understand the peculiarity of the concerns of agricultural data? And three is how do we build a government data landscape which is high quality and is usable and interoperable. And in that context, we also have to think about standards of sharing. So I'll pause there and come in whenever there's the discussion.
That's very interesting, Asta. I think the 3 points that you raised really, is one of the major concerns with regards to the reciprocity, especially that if government is not willing to share, then how can policymakers expect the market to reciprocate and meet the common goal towards data governance, protection, and a common repository. So with this, I would invite Tarak to present his perspective as a practitioner, collecting data from farmers and running their engines, intelligent engines to process information on how they are, ensuring data governance, safeguard, preventing leakage, data security, etc., from a technology point of view, and also how difficult it is as a concept for an agtech practitioner to really implement some of these standards, reciprocate the or meet the requirements of the government's policies if it at all comes through. So over to you, Tarak.
Thanks, Partha, and thanks, Microsoft, for giving me the opportunity. I have a few slides. I'll just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Tarek, it's visible.
Yeah. See, my name is, again, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Tarkeshwar. I'm CEO and co-founder of Dwara e-Registry. Dwara e-Registry was set up in 2019. I have been associated with the Dwara e-Registry from since inception. So what we essentially do in Dwara e-Registry is we aim to be the financial inclusion and productivity platform, enabling platform for all the stakeholders in agri value chain, especially targeting a small and marginal farmers. By providing farm level analytics, this is the where we bring the unique value addition to provide the farm level analytics and farmer level actionable insights by using technologies like AI, ML, and remote sensing technologies. The approach for the Dwara e-Registry is to build a digital platform. This digital platform will enable the small and marginal farmers to get the access to the markets. When we are talking about the markets, one is the input and output and the financial services like credit as well as the insurance. The approach we have taken to reach the small and marginal farmers through FPOs. FPO is essentially a farmer produce organization registered under the Producer Companies Act, essentially a group of farmers who come together, have a common interest, and to build a aggregation of their services as well as the products and output. It gives the more bargaining power to the farmers, and it will essentially act as a kind of a common service center to the farmers. Now, how, and from the FPO too, we use these technologies and getting the data from the farmers, use these certain analytics tools to take an appropriate decision. By FPOs can take these appropriate decisions, and we also take an appropriate decision for the providing the financial services and other services. So how do we approach this? Getting the FPOs as well as the farmers, collecting the data from the farmers. The data is the input for the entire this platform. So the first approach is whenever we onboard the farmer, there is a static data and there is a dynamic data. Data collection is a digital collection, but it's assisted because we can't expect the farmer will have a smartphone and tech savvy to input the data. It's a kind of assisted by the FPO, farmer produce organization, or by our staff. And first step is the collecting the farmer static data. Static data is complete is kind of land records as well as the digitization of these land farms. That's where the starting point, and other assets which can be used for the kind of getting that insurance and credit services. Then the second step, what we do is season on season, we collect the seasonal data, kind of inputs, what they use, kind of output, kind of what are the output, what are the seasonality for the harvesting dates, what is the output and what is the yield. And all this is the continuously season on season, we collect the data. With the static data and the seasonal data, we help the farmers as well as the FPO to take a certain decisions. One, of course, all these farmers who are on the platform, they get advisory services based on the data. And FPO will get the financial services. But this stack will be used as a kind of information backbone for the FPO. So with this stack, FPO can take appropriate decisions for the input connect and output connect and other decisions. And it will get the finance from the financial institutions, and it will provide the farm services to the FPOs. Now, and of course, this data we use for the analytics, there is a remote sensing technology we use to assess the farmers to have a credit worthy, credit unworthy, then the farmers will get the credit services from the banks. Whole approach is to get the farmers to see the whole approach is the small and marginal farmers to get the appropriate services at a reasonable price. Now, What kind of solutions we are providing to the farmers? This data helps us to take the sowing decisions based on the market prices. We provide the spot prices, market prices to the farmers through app and other mediums so that they can take a sowing decisions season on season. And crop advisory services based on the geography and based on the crop, the farmers will get it. And farmers also get the sharing the chemical names in place of the brand names so that farmers can get the cost competitive product. And weather variability, weather forecast for the next 5 days is provided in the platform. And credit availability, the extensive data of the farmers and transactional data of the farmers and FPO used for the credit decisions. So where we bring the banks and financial institutions to provide the credit services to the farmers. And the commodity storage services and price dissemination, sharing the prices of all major APMCs available in India so that farmers can take when to sell their produce and where to sell their produce. And of course, this FPO farmers, as I said, based on this price decisions, they can take where to sell. And the FPO also will provide the procurement services. Now, if you look at the FPOs, as a FPO, now that I was talking about the farmers, now it's about FPO. This is the information backbone for the FPO for operating its decisions. FPOs will take a decision of input demand and forecasting of inputs season on season. If they wanted to sell these inputs, aggregate the inputs and sell to the farmers. And the FPO will have a visibility on the crop yields for their procurement forecasting in future. And the FPOs can do a backward and forward linkages through this platform. And getting the finance, I have already talked based on this transactional data for FPOs or banks are willing to finance based on these transactions. Accounts, compliance, and all the accounts. The most importantly here I wanted to tell regarding the climate. Entire the data from the sowing to the harvesting, the platform has a features to capture all the cultivation of operations if FPO wanted to capture. So it will help the finding if farmers are doing the organic cultivation, it will help the finding the traceability. The point number 2 here, the FPO and we are trying to adopt a certain measures so that farmers will do a different kind of practices where the FPO can trade the carbon trade blocks. So already there are 3 FPOs are involved in the bamboo cultivation and dry paddy sowing cultivation, wherein all this operational data is captured. This data is helping the FPOs to trade in the carbon blocks. Of course, it's a communication with the entire platform helps the FPOs into the communication to the farmers, and it's a business decision platform. So this is how we are using the platform services to the to provide the services to the farmers, and this data then with the using the farmers data. The major challenges in that there is a kind of data collection. The data collection from the farmer, it's a challenge because we have tried with the digital data collection from farmers voluntarily coming and providing the data, but this is a challenge because farmer needs to see the tangible benefit to provide this data collection. Second point of this, whenever we talk about the organic cultivation and traceability as well as climate resilience and when we capture the data captured at a various point of times is very important. So again, it's getting this data and putting in a proper documentation so that we can give the proper tangible benefit to the farmer by making the kind of carbon trade, by enabling them in a carbon trade. And third is we tried in the self data submission model, but it has been partially success because the again farmer needs to have a tangible benefit to provide to submit their data. But fourth most important is this data is owned by the aggregation of the farmers and their farmers community. So that is one thing the farmers the matured FPOs where we find that farmers have putting the confidence the FPOs, because the FPOs are run by the farmers, and where those kind of FPOs where farmers are coming and providing their data and voluntarily providing this complete harvesting and complete stage by stage data. So with this, I will stop here. If you have any questions, I will answer.
Thank you, Tarak. So I think we have reached and heard three different point of views, all all basically directing towards one particular issue, which is the ability of the farmers to manage their own data, to participate in the data sharing process, and the practical challenges, like how Tarek just pointed out, that even if they would want the farmers to come forward and use the applications to feed in the information themselves, it's not always that simple, and incentivizing for the farmers to do so, to take that additional effort. So thereby most financial institutions and Agtechs end up with the assisted model, where a set of questions and set of information are collected from the farmers, and if they understand that, okay, basis this information we will get certain value, which is a credit at the end of the day, or an insurance, or some tangible benefits, they don't mind much in sharing a lot of static, dynamic, personal, non-personal information, as Asta was pointing out. So now one question that comes sort of pertinent here, and this is to Jonathan and Asta, that what can be done, from an policy point of view, or from the program point of view, to create this awareness within the communities, within the farming communities, and at scale. Like if you're talking about India, it's a huge market, and every state, every market has different levels of understanding about information technology, outlook point of view. Local languages often create a lot of information barrier. So coming from that point, how do we sort of reinforce the necessity that your data should be protected by you, and you should be more cognizant of it? And I think Graham also has a question. He's asking that, is there not a question as to whether we focus data collection and the resultant value? So what are the benefits and drawback to operating at like each level? So there is a question from Graham, and there's a question from me also, that how do we empower the farmers at scale? Over to you, Jonathan and Asta. You
want to go first, Asta? Or?
No, I'll follow you.
Right, cool. I'm reminded of two of our case studies, actually, just to give you an example of the scope of this question, because I think that it's so broad, and it really depends on sort of the context of what kind of data and with whom you're talking about. One example that I think it's important to mention, or interesting to mention at least, is a case study that we built with an organization in South Africa, where they worked with local fishing communities, so fishing is a part of agriculture, to sort of co-develop together different types of applications to collect data. And this was primarily done because a lot of the fishing communities, small fishers, marginalized fishers, are not accounted for by the government, right? The government has an incentive to sort of not take them up in the picture, right? Because of big companies and other political problems there. So there are ways to sort of incentivize farmers to see the value of their data being collected, and to give a voice to those people, and sort of put them basically on sort of giving them the steering wheel in this. And a lot of data has been collected, and a lot of that data is now shared with the government, and it has actually positively influenced policy over the last couple of years. Also, interestingly, they've worked very closely with different research institutions, as the farmers or the fishers hold a lot of interesting data about the environment and climate change happening. So there's a lot of ways that fishers have actually participated there and collected better and more quality, knowing the value of that data. Another entirely different example is from an organization that worked with farmers in Indonesia, and together with a large company, they actually started to pay farmers for their data. So it's one of the few examples actually where there is a financial reward for data for farmers sharing their data. And I mean, there's more to say about this example, but the result is at least that a lot of the farmers are actually now a lot more aware of the type of data they are collecting. And so the quality of data has massively increased, and people are also a lot more incentivized to collect data. So those are two examples, I think, that might be of interest. After you ask.
So I have one more example.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Please.
Yeah, since Jonathan has touched on how we will incentivize the farmers to provide the data. We are doing one commercial project on the carbon trades on the bamboo farmers in Madhya Pradesh with the 5 FPOs. These FPOs were formed by us. And it's a very long bamboo cultivation. It's like a 30 years kind of long kind of project. So of course, government of Madhya Pradesh is involved. So it's afforestation of the degraded lands in the tribal areas with the bamboo. So the commercial value of the farmers will get maybe after 6 years, each acre, the trading of the carbon black blocks in the bamboo, it's about 1,300 to 1,400 per acre to the farmer, in addition to the what he gets in the cultivation. Point number 1. So there, we are getting a very good response to the farmers. One, government is supporting on the bamboo cultivation on the degraded land. Second is, they know that from the 6th year to 30th year, they are getting the per acre additional income by trading these carbon blocks. Second project we did it's a bit difficult on the dry paddy rice cultivation, dry sowing rice cultivation. Indian practice is like as rice cultivation is always flooded with the water. Dry sowing is slightly farmers need to change their methodology of tilling as well as the cultivation practices when they're sowing. So this is also currently for Indian market, if you kind of quantify it, about 2,000 rupees per 2,200 per hectare, farmer can get the year on year in addition to their harvesting. This is immediate product. We have got a very good response. So with these farmers, 2 FPOs, farmers are voluntarily coming and providing the data. It's not about the farm data. It's about the each 15 days they need to update us what exactly the cultivation practice they're doing from the different from the traditional cultivation. That's how they will be qualified for the carbon trade for this, especially in this project. But we have got the good result. But the point for implementation as a commercial entity, and the farmers need to be shown the tangible benefits of this entire to do a different practice of providing the data. We have seen the very good results in the 2 of our projects.
Over to you, Astrid.
Yeah, I can just add, I think that the idea of incentive alignment is absolutely right. So as I said, there can be incentives in the form of better services, greater transparency, more convenience. There are some problematic incentives that also we see, being offered in the data economy, such as data monetization, which I personally would like to steer clear from, because it does add misaligned incentives in some ways. But I think that the ability of farmers to draw value from their data is absolutely a clear incentive. And we are noticing this even in the work that we are doing with the women's cooperative. When you explain to them the value of both data collection and use broadly, they ask, why should we do this? Because it is indeed additional labor and something to think about. But when you are able to communicate that they will be able to show creditworthiness through the pooled data, they will be able to demonstrate and get better loan products because they are going to have more information. That is something people certainly understand. And I think that there's a huge role for both FPOs as well as other civil society organizations that work at the intersection of welfare in very many ways, because we realize that so many benefits for farmers, whether it's in the form of government subsidies or programs, etc., are done through civil society organizations, and they also collect a significant amount of data on farmers and their well-beings, and can serve as that point of not aggregation, but certainly understanding on farmer lives, and also provide some kind of narratives around data values. And we've been doing, again, some work around thinking of the role of civil society organizations in the data journeys, and realizing that both as a way of unlocking that value as well as preventing data extraction, civil society organizations have a significant role. Because at least for us, the interaction of farmers with the data economy needs to be mediated at the moment, and that mediation can happen through the FPOs, it can happen through cooperatives, it can happen through civil society organizations, but it is certainly something that needs to happen. And I agree with you, Graham. I think that there are obviously pros and cons of operating at different level. I think there needs to also be a combination. So there will be certain types of data that is more relevant at the FPO level, whereas other types of data may be relevant at the individual farmer level. And of course, in the context of India, given the complexity and diversity of who a farmer is, that also changes. So you may see small shareholder farmers interacting with the data economy differently than large landholding farmers. And I think that the instruments we offer to collect, use, consent, share, all of that with regard to data, to what Jonathan said, like it cannot be a one size fits all. It needs to be a diverse set of instruments and also a policy landscape that reflects this diversity.
Thank you, Astha. And we can take a few more questions before Astha leaves. She has a hard stop at 7. But yeah, I mean, if we have any more questions for our panelists to answer, because I see that even within our organization there is a lot of discussion around data governance in general. Considering we have a good deal of understanding about the digital economy, the data economy. So request any of our colleagues to pose questions that might be troubling them for some time in this topic. Arjun, Gayatri, Christine, Doreen, anyone? Not only India centric, but yeah, I mean, it's a global issue. So anyone?
I have one question to ask them, Jonathan.
Okay.
Is there any kind of, right now we are collecting the data, using, mining, everything we are doing. Is there any kind of governance or regulation in anywhere in the world is there any kind of regulation that governs the agriculture data, farmers data? Because in India, of course, there is a consumer protection data, as well as the RBI lays out the the financial data protection, but agriculture data protection, there is not kind of many laws and that are governing in India. But what is your experience across the world? If there is any regulation that governs the agriculture data?
I mean, I don't know about you, Jonathan, but I haven't seen any specific data governance mechanism on agricultural data. What I have seen is different ways, like I said. So even in India, there is and I forget, but it's like a protection on seed formulas, for instance, I think. So there are different informational uh, in or informational protections that farmers enjoy. On the other end, we are also seeing in the EU things like data spaces that are coming up. So, there's going to be a climate change data space. There's going to be likely a smart cities data space, which is again a closed network for sharing data. And I think agriculture data is also going to be a part of it. The rules and governance mechanisms of what those data spaces are going to be like is still up for grabs. But I think that India's idea, which is the whatever Indian digital ecosystem for agriculture, is going to be something that is certainly worth looking forward to. Graham also has a question on factoring digital divide, and are farmers not likely to be left behind? Absolutely, and that's a concern as well. And again, like, not to repeat myself extensively, but I think that the role of farmer collectives is a significant one. So I think that processes of digitization will be quicker and more democratic if they happen through farmer collectives, even in this context, of course. And again, everybody who's been working on India's digital story in particular, but also globally, will know that there are exclusions. And I think that this offline systems that we have, and again, this is the work that I did with Microsave as well, which is that, when food subsidies were being digitized in some ways, or fertilizer subsidies were being digitized, I think what we learned is that there are a group of people who have access and would be happy with the efficiencies of digitization, but exclusion exists, and therefore making sure that it's like it's incremental in some ways and not a snap of the finger digitalization is certainly something to think about. Jonathan, I'll pass it over.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus one to everything you said. First of all, I'm also, I'm not aware of any specific regulations about agriculture when it comes to data protection and data collection. I know there are some European laws that are very specific when it comes to some types of data sets, but bear with me, I don't know exactly. These are like regulations on cutting trees and stuff, etc. Like nothing really like for the whole agricultural sector. And what I think is also important to note when it comes to sort of the digital divide, and it's a great question, Graham. So that's something really we put attention to in our report, is also to think about, when we talk about data, can we also talk about knowledge and information? And when we talk about local communities, we did one case study with the cooperatives or one cooperative in Colombia, led by women. Like none of the information is available in data. It's all their knowledge, the knowledge that they've gained over many decades and centuries. And how can they benefit from that knowledge? We're not even talking about data here, right? How do they listen to their land and listen to the environment, and these are totally different ways of thinking about governance, right? So sort of also like the commons way of looking at information and knowledge and data. So there's some things that you can find in our report as well on this topic.
Great. So thank you, Jonathan, for steering this particular conversation, and Asta for chipping in with your understanding of the Indian perspective and the policy landscape and essentially the community led organizations, how they are progressing towards the path of data equity and data governance. And brilliant insights from Tarak as a practitioner, where he gradually shaped the narrative around what they are doing with the data, the kind of benefits that they are delivering by using those data, analyzing those data, but at the same time highlighting a very important factor that how incentivization in some projects are enabling more participatory approach towards data collection management by smallholder farmers. And great questions from Graham and other colleagues around how do we make it more inclusive, scaled up, and how do we address issues like digital divide? Where should we focus on, whether at an individual level or at a collective level? So I think overall the conversation is leading towards a direction where, as I said at the onset, that as a crack VC platform, this is the essence where we all stakeholders come together, share our perspectives, and through it we do a brainstorming and try to understand where we as organizations or individuals can contribute towards the greater picture of a data-driven digital agriculture ecosystem, but with larger participation of farmers in the information system towards one common goal, that is dissemination of information, transformation of the overall agriculture sector. So thank you all. Arjun, if you want to close this with just a 1 minute vote of thanks to all our panelists, that'll be great. Thank you. Over to you, Arjun.
Yeah, thank you. I posted a question, but I think we can let it go. Let it go. I think those examples are in Jonathan's report, hopefully, so we can. Jonathan, maybe if you could, we'll share the report. But if Tarak and Jonathan could share their presentations also with us, we'll make sure that the panelists have access to presentations. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. This has been a very productive conversation, and we hope you will stay engaged. And in the future, we will hope to have numerous of these kinds of webinars as part of the club, the virtual club that we're running. And thank you everybody for attending. Thank you so much.